Alright guys, I figured I should make another one of the scripting extra tutorials because they get a lot of, responses and stuff, and I figured people like them because they, walk you through all the steps. Even though I don't do it in detail, you still get to see how scripts are made. Um, Problem right now, Roblox got rid of Play Solo, which was something that they got rid of a long time ago, but was still able to be used if you know how to do it correctly. The problem with that being gone is that that's what I used to use for these videos because it was a lot easier for me to code in real time and show you guys on my character in real time that things are happening. At the moment though, I'm going to have to use the start and stop buttons up here to create scripts and stuff, which is going to be kind of lame. Hopefully they add that back. We've made some posts on the dev forums about it, but nobody really knows for sure if it's coming back. So this time I figured I'd start with a sword because people like swords. Maybe. I just like making weapons because I figure games need weapons or, something like that to, be a game. So let's just go into meshes like I did, and you can create, grab any mesh of a sword, or if you want to use the Roblox meshes, just go to the catalog and try and figure out, or search for models for them. I like using meshes just because, there's a lot higher quality swords on there. This looks to be like some sort of master sword from like Zelda or something. So we're going to rename it Handle, and we can't really put a texture on it, so we're just going to make it blue. And we're going to copy it and put it into our tool here. And we can rename our tool to Sword. So if we do the play button, we should spawn with the sword. But it's offset incorrectly, so let's fix that. This is something I can do in kind of real time, but I'll have to remember it. So the grip pose is really where it sits in your hand, and all the other little things here are like how it's rotated. They're really confusing to use, so usually I just enter random values, but we don't have to do that because it's already upright. So that seems good. We should remember negative 1.5. Go out of here. It's reverted, which is why I like Play Solo, because it doesn't revert the changes, but it reverted back to 0, so I had to put it in again. So now let's actually just throw a script in there. And unlike in my tutorial on fireballs or anything filtering enabled, because this is just a basic sword, we don't really need to use filtering enabled things. I mean, I can obviously turn it on, which I'll do, but you don't need two scripts. Usually you need two scripts, a local one and a server one, and then a remote event to communicate filtering enabled in most cases, but for swords you don't, and that's because of a little special property that tools have. So I'm just going to reference the tool script up here. They have tool.activated, which is an event that fires when players use phones or iPads to like click the screen, or use like an Xbox controller, and I think they have to hit like X on it, and that'll all count as tool.activated. Which basically means you don't have to record the mouse input, as I did in my last video or last tutorial. I recorded the mouse's input. I don't have to do that because Roblox does that for me and sends it into tool.activated. The problem with this is I can't grab like where the mouse is located. I can only grab that it clicked, and that's about it. But that's okay with the sword. So we need to put something that happens when you activate the sword. Obviously we don't have anything right now, so we have to make an animation. So you have to get the animation plugin and create like a block rig. Now they have this new thing, and all these little blue like green dots are stupid, so you can turn those off if you go to models and click show details off, because they're worthless to me. I also use a slightly outdated version of the animation editor. I don't know why. It doesn't matter. There shouldn't be too much of a difference. I've used these before. So we're going to know that the sword is going to be in this hand right here, because all tools are default located in the right hand. But the right hand for R15 and R6 characters have the whole right arm is where the tool is located. Advantage of R15 is if we want to move the tool around, we can just move the hand. So a really basic sword animation, we'll just make it chop downwards. So we can just have the start of this animation, have it upwards. And if you can kind of envision in your mind, the sword will be kind of facing like this right now. And if we want to add even more depth, we can make even more, further back. And then we're going to actually change the length of this, because we don't need a 2-second long animation. We need just, half a second maybe. And I like to put my animations kind of like this, where I copy the first frame and put it on the second frame as well. That way they hold the animation for a little bit longer and it looks more realistic, or at least better. Adds a little more impact to the swing too. And then we can have them go down like this. And I give it a 0.1 second interval because that makes, things that move fast in animations make them have more power behind them. And we don't have to do really anything else other than disable the things we don't want. So obviously we don't need any of this stuff because this is all parts of the humanoid that we don't, or the parts of the character that we don't want overridden. We only want the right arm, right lower arm, and right hand. Because that's all that's moving in this animation. Even if I have key points on the other ones, as long as these are disabled, you don't have to worry about that. So let's just export it really quick. And make sure to grab this link right here. And you can then close this. And if you want to use this animation object, you can. But let's scroll back down to the tool, and we can insert it ourselves. And just paste that in there. It'll auto-correct itself to that version of the link. And so we have the animation that we want played. But now we need to load the animation, and we did this on the Fireball tutorial, so we have to reference the humanoid that this tool's inside of. So luckily, whenever tool.activated is fired, the sword is equipped inside the character. So we can say that the character is the, tool's parent, because that's what it's going to be. And we can say that the humanoid is the humanoid inside that character. So that's really, really easy to reference that. If we wanted to reference them at the beginning of the script, when the script first loaded, we'd have to be like local car is equal to script.parent.parent.parent, I think, because that'd be the script to the sword, to the backpack, to the player object, and then into the character. But I think it's a lot more efficient just to do it when you activate the script because you already know where the tool is going to be, and it's a lot shorter of a path that you have to take. Now there's kind of two ways to load an animation. I usually use this method where you local anim load animation and reference that animation, so it'd be script.parent.animation because it's right here. And then you can do anim play. You can name this anything you want, by the way, and all these can be changed. If in my first tutorial I talk about variables, and they can be named anything. And this would immediately play the animation. So let's watch that. Well, the sword's not loaded yet, but there it is, and it works fine. Now the other way to do an animation is you don't have to set it up like this at all. Oopsie. I'm going to comment these out real quick. You can just do it all in one line. Just like this. So instead of having two lines, you can do it in one line, and it'll work just the same. Problem with this version of doing it is this is only when you want to just play the animation and do nothing else with it. There are other times where if you use the first version I showed like this, you can do pretty interesting things. You can wait 0.2 seconds and then adjust the speed of the animation to 0, which will cause the sword to stop moving completely after 0.2 seconds. And there it is, it stopped at the top because that's where we put 0.2. And then you can, wait, one more second and then adjust the speed to 3. And it'll move really fast through those remaining animations. Maybe you want to, charge up the sword. There's the charging up, and then it swings down really quick. And that's the advantage of loading animations like that. Fun fact, I guess, or really the arguments for the anim play thing. There's three arguments. These are the default arguments for them, is 0.1, 1, and 1. Obviously this blank, it'll be the same thing. But the first argument is how long it takes for that animation to be loaded into the character, basically. Or like how smooth. So in 0.1, your character will have 0.1 seconds of them moving into the animation starting. Or if you put it at 0, it'll immediately move in. So I'll show the difference of those two real quick, but I won't use 0.1 and 0, I'll just use 0 and maybe something else. So see, it moves incredibly fast in the startup with 0, but if I make it 0.2, you'll see that it has a much smoother time going back up and then falling, or moving back up to the starting position. Now because this animation is so quick, 0.5 seconds, it won't go all the way up because by the time those 0.2 seconds of tweening up to the start position happens, the script or the animation will already be at a point where it wants to swing down. So that's why it's not going up all the way. But basically, if you want animations to load in very smoothly, you want to make this number pretty high. Pretty high, I mean just high enough that like it's not instantaneous. 0.2 is probably my favorite little threshold there, though. The second argument right here is about it's about weight, which is like I don't really actually know what it does. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with making animations play over each other. But you can already do that in the animation editor using the animators like weight there, which is like core, movement, idle, and action. Or whatever order you play the animations in will also override them, so I just ignore this one completely. I've never found a good use for it. And the last one is the starting speed. So if you start at 0, I've never started one at 0, I'm pretty sure it just doesn't move at all. But let's find out real quick. Oh, actually it'll go to the starting animation. That's interesting. Well, anyways, you can change the speed to whatever you want. I don't think there's a cap on it. Like if I put 9999, it'll probably just run incredibly fast and your arm will probably just twitch. Yeah. So there's no cap on how fast it can go. And this is what anim adjust speed changes. So that's just some fun things about animations, but we don't really need to talk about those anymore. Maybe I'll do a full episode on animations because they're pretty important. Anyways, back to the sword script. Now that we have the sword swinging, we should make it so that the sword can't swing like constantly. We'll have to make a little bit of a cooldown. And these are really basic ways of doing cooldowns. I use N, or you can use bool or enabled or whatever you want, but I use N because it stands for enabled. And you want to set it to true at the beginning because this is just a bool value that you're establishing as true. And you want to put here that if N is false, then return end. So if this value is false, then it's going to return the script, so it means nothing below it will happen, which is what we want to happen if it's disabled. So once we check if it isn't disabled, we do want to disable it. That way it can't do it twice. And then we're going to give a wait time of 0.5 seconds, that's how long the animation is, and then we'll set it back to true. This allows us to have a cooldown of 0.5 seconds between all the swings possible. So even if I have an auto clicker, I can only swing at a maximum of 0.5. So that's really helpful. I mean, I can make it less, like 0.1, and you'll be able to interrupt your own animation, kind of like that. But 0.5 is what we'll keep it as. You kind of want to memorize, or at least try really hard to figure out how these bool and like cooldowns work, because they're very, very useful. So now that we have the sword swinging and we have a cooldown on it, we can simply just make the sword actually do damage. So what we're going to do for that is tool.handle, which we know is the tool's handle, .touch is an event that plays whenever something touches something else. That's good. And the argument passed along is that part that touched the handle. So I usually name it hit, but you could name it part if you wanted to, anything you want. So now we can just make a nice if statement, and we'll do if hit. So make sure that the thing we hit does still exist. This used to be a glitch where things would be able to break and disappear right after hitting something, which would cause the script to error. That doesn't really happen anymore, but it's still not a bad habit to make sure that it exists. So then we'll do an AND symbol. I don't know if I ever covered this, but it's basically when you do two if statements in the same statement or more. And hit dot parent. So the parent of whatever we just hit, find first child, is making sure that this whatever we're searching for exists. And we want to find a humanoid. An enemy humanoid is obviously going to be inside the parent of whatever we hit of their character. So like if we took this dummy and the sword hit its lower left arm, we'll then check the parent, which is the dummy, for the humanoid, which is another child. So if we do that, then we can continue. Obviously then and then end is also needed. So we can do hit.parent find first child human again, but because we already know it's there, we can just do a dot humanoid. It's a lot easier, but you don't have to. It doesn't really matter what you do as long as you reference the humanoid again. But again, for example, you can use this to reference the humanoid, and you can take damage, and then take damage is a function that allows humanoids to take damage. But before this function existed, we'd use .health, and we'd reference itself and then minus something, so minus like 1. The problem with this is health updates at like a really strange interval, and sometimes this can cause you to do damage that is immediately healed back, or it's really strange. So I'd suggest always using take damage instead, and so this would make the human take 5 damage per hit. Or if you want to make a sword that heals, you can make that negative, and then they take negative damage to the heal. So let's do that, and let's bring our dummy down to really close here so we can see this in action. Now what's going to happen is he's going to take a lot of damage. That's more than 5 damage. The reason for this is we need another cooldown, because every time they take damage, it's gonna, there's nothing stopping it from hitting multiple times. So we're going to need another cooldown like this one here. So let's make this one 10 for touch enabled is what I usually do. And we'll set that to true. And we'll do the same thing, only slightly different. We'll do if not 10, then return end. And this little statement here, not 10, is the same thing as 10 equal false, or also it's also the same thing as 10 equal nil. But it's a lot, it's you don't have to use this if it confuses you. Just continue to use 10 equal false. And then obviously what we're going to do is we're going to set it to false and then give it a cooldown of 0.5 because that's what the swing time is. So now it should only do 0.5 damage whenever it touches it. But as you can see, it does damage whether we're swinging or not. So we only want it to do damage when we're swinging. An easy fix for this is we'll have to make another thing. We'll make another bool, local swinging equals false, and we'll put this up here. If not swinging, then return end. And we can make it, once the animation plays, we can set swing to true, and then once it ends, we can swing equal false. This way, it'll only do damage if it's swinging. So as we can see, once it loads in, it won't do damage anymore, but once I start swinging, it will do damage, and it will only do 5 damage now. Now, a little bit of good practice here is it will have this cooldown that we put on the touched event, whether or not it does damage to the humanoid or not, which is kind of a bad practice. Like, let's say it hits a wall, it might, make the cooldown happen. What we should do instead is take this these statements right here and put them inside of the, whoopsie, put those in the wrong spot. Put those inside of the if statement. That way it only sets 10 to false and back to true again if the humanoid is found and it chooses to do damage. It'll still work exactly the same though, so no worries there. Now, there's an even better way to do this. As you can see, 0.5 equals true. We don't have to put this here. We can actually put 10 equals to true up here as well, because that'll reset the touch enabled whenever you stop swinging. I'm sorry, actually we want to put it where you start swinging. Now, but as you can see under here, it's underlined with blue, and I guess it gives it like a weird little error there. And all you have to do for that is make sure that that the script's in order. So 10 has to be referenced up here first before it's referenced below it. So this will still act exactly the same, hopefully. There's really no difference to this version. Of course, you don't have to put the 10 there. You can use the 10 inside itself like we were doing originally. There's a few problems with putting it in here. For example, if you hit someone at the very end of this, it only swings for 0.5 seconds. If you hit someone at 0.4 seconds into the swing, you have to wait another 0.5 seconds before it's able to do damage again, which means you've already been swinging again. And if you add this up, you basically can only do damage at the end 1/10 of a second of your swing animation if you're constantly clicking and doing damage there. So that's why I feel like putting 10 up here would be a lot more effective. So now we have a really basic sword. Let's up the damage to 15 because that's more realistic for a Roblox weapon. And this is just a super basic sword. There's nothing special about it. It does damage. You can do other effects with it. Something I like to do in my games is make it so that you can use more than one animation. That's something super easy. You just have to make another one. I'll probably just use a preloaded one real quick. Alright, so I inserted a second animation that I made a couple days ago, and it's called Animation 2. So what we're going to want to do is actually, let's name this one Animation 1, and so we have Animation 1 and Animation 2. And what we can do right here is make it so it chooses randomly between the two. So you're going to do this now. Now putting it in brackets and quotes like this is going to be the same thing as putting a period, but it allows us to do better string manipulation. So what we can do then is put 2 dots and then math.random 1, 2. 2 dots are used to separate strings in when manipulating strings. So I can have a bunch of different stuff in here. So this would mean animation X and then 1, 2. So that means it could come out as animation X1 or animation X2. Obviously we don't have an X in it, so we don't need that part. But by itself now it's animation 1 or animation 2 at random. So there's our second animation, there's our first animation, and they are random. And there's a problem. Maybe you don't want random animations, so let's make them go in order. I do this a lot too. So we're going to replace math.random 1, 2 with a value called on, which is what I usually use. And we'll say on is equal to 1. So whenever you do it, it'll do animation dot dot on. On is 1, so it'll always do animation 1, as I'll show. Only the first animation right now. So we want on to count up, so we'll do on is equal on plus 1. Actually, let's do that at the end of the thing. So that way we'll do the first animation and then the second animation. But then after that you'll get an error because it keeps on trying to count up, but there's no number 3. So what we have to do is we have to make another if statement. If on is greater than or equal to 3, then on is equal to 1. So basically this will count up to 2, and once it's at 2 it'll count to 3, but once it recognizes that it's greater than or equal to 3, it'll set it back to 1, which will end up alternating between 1 and 2. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And we can even do another thing where maybe we want the second animation to be slower and not be able to be used as quickly. You know, maybe you've exhausted all your animations, so you want the very final animation to last a little bit longer on a cooldown so that players can move in and punish that. So we'll maybe make it set an extra 0.5, so an entire 1 full second anytime it's greater than or equal to 3, basically anytime the second animation plays. So now we'll have an interval of 0.5 seconds and then a whole second. As you can see, the first animation transitions to the second animation a lot faster than it goes back. Now the very last thing is, what if you have someone that is doing what you want, but every time they don't swing for a while, you want that to reset to the first animation. That's something that I discovered I do a couple months back, and there's a few ways to do it, but I think the most effective way is to use tick. So local timer is equal to tick. That's the first thing you want to set up. Tick is like the amount of seconds since basically the amount of seconds, but it goes down to like milliseconds, I don't know, very small amount of time, but it's a huge number because tick is like how long it's been counting up since like this one time back in 1986 or something, who knows. Doesn't matter. What it does is it basically just gives you a time that constantly increases. As you can see, if I keep on entering it, it'll count up over time. So basically it's just a giant world clock. And that's really, really helpful. So what we want here, so basically what we can use this for is see how long it's been since the last time we attacked. So what we can do, we'll do this at the beginning, is we'll do print, which will give us a little statement at the bottom, tick minus timer. And that'll show us the last time timer was updated. And we'll put tick as back timer that. Every time we do that, it'll show us how long since we last clicked, because it'll subtract the current tick from the tick that was stored when you last stored tick. So you can see there's a 1 and a 0.65, and these numbers are very similar to 0.5 and 0.12. The only difference of them not being exactly is because I'm not using an auto clicker, and because there's maybe a little bit of latency in between my input. But ideally, those are supposed to be 0.5 and 1, because that is the cooldown that we set up. So what that means is we can make it say that if that time, we'll do that right now, if that time that we found out is greater than 2 seconds, well then let's just set the on back to 1. So what this will do is we can do the first animation, wait 2 seconds, first animation, wait 2 seconds, first animation. But if we do before 2 seconds, then you'll continue into the second animation. Even if we wait 1 second, it'll continue into the second animation. So that's really helpful for making it reset the animations if you don't want players storing, stopping on the third animation and then continuing with the fourth animation after like a minute of not clicking at all. Well, that's really basically it for a really basic sword. This isn't like a classic Roblox sword, as you know, there's no twitching and there's no tons of damage, but this is a really basic like weapon sword that you could use in maybe an RPG or an MMO, anything like that. Anything that uses swords that's not default Roblox sword footing. This is like a different kind of sword, like a real game sword almost. And there's a lot of other things you can do to customize it. The damage, more animations, you could do other things. Maybe if you really wanted them to always jump on the second attack, you could set the humanoid's jump to true, and then they'll be able to, you know, maybe the second one's all is forced to be a jumping attack. You know, oh, it didn't work. Oh, there it is. That's because I put it in the cooldown, but that's okay. So there's all kinds of things you can use with these. And if you really wanted to, you could do like, you know, poison damage or something. If you made a short like 10 loop, a loop of 10 times where, you know, it did like 1 damage over, you know, 0.1 seconds every time. Like this. Wow. How interesting. So you can do all those different things with these kinds of swords. And they're the kinds I use for almost everything I do now. Even if it's not swords, I'll use it in punching. Because, yeah, it's just an effective way to do damage. And, you know, a lot of customization. So that's the end of this video. Yeah, I don't really have much to say this time.